All right, welcome back. You're watching CNN. I'm Brooke Baldwin. Day 27 of this government shutdown. And as we've been watching both sides back and forth now, an unusual move from President Trump toward the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Our chief White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, is standing by with that development. Jim, what is President Trump saying?
Well, our nation's capital has officially become a playground, Brooke. The president has responded in sort of a childish way, is the only way to describe it, to the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, to her letter, essentially saying that the State of the Union will be postponed, or she asked that it be submitted in writing if the government is still shut down. This is the letter right here from the president. The press secretary, Sarah Sanders, I guess in lieu of having actual briefings here at the White House, just tweeted this out. It says, Madam Speaker, due to the shutdown, I am sorry to inform you that your trip to Brussels, Egypt, and Afghanistan has been postponed. We will reschedule this 7-day excursion when the shutdown is over in light of the 800,000 great American workers not receiving pay. I'm sure you would agree that postponing this public relations event is totally appropriate. It goes on to talk about how the president is going to continue to defend the nation's borders, and he's calling upon the speaker to join his strong border security movement, as he's calling it, to end the shutdown. But what this letter does not include, Brooke, is any kind of response from the president to what he's actually going to do about the State of the Union coming up on January 29th. We've been talking to our sources throughout the last 24 hours or so, and what we understand is that they're looking at a variety of options inside the White House. I talked to a White House official late last night who said, look, the president is going to show up at the Capitol on January 29th to deliver the State of the Union speech. And I talked to one Trump advisor earlier today who said that some of the betting is, and these are folks who egg on the president to some extent, but some of the betting is that Nancy Pelosi will fold in all of this and allow the president to deliver the State of the Union speech. And this advisor described the Trump-Pelosi battle right now as King Kong versus Godzilla, and will allow the viewers at home to decide which one is King Kong and which one is Godzilla. But this letter is not really just to offer an observation, not really a serious response to what the House Speaker said yesterday, which is you can't have a State of the Union speech at the Capitol on January 29th.
So hang on a second. All right. So this is the president's volley. Now back to Speaker Pelosi. Does the president have the authority, Jim, to cancel these trips to Brussels, Egypt, and Afghanistan? Not only is she a member of Congress, she is the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. Can he do that?
Well, the letter goes on to say, obviously, if you would like to make your journey by flying commercial, that would certainly be your prerogative. I suppose the president is saying if the House Speaker would like to fly commercial on a commercial carrier, she can do that. But what the president is saying is that he's not going to allow government employees to be a part of any kind of excursion that the House Speaker would be on overseas, whether that be flying her, protecting her, and so on. And so, yes, this is sort of a back and forth that seems to be going on between the president and the House Speaker. But interestingly, and up until this point, we haven't seen it, no response from the White House to the House Speaker saying yesterday you can't give a State of the Union speech on January 29th. This letter right here, saying that he could cancel her upcoming travel plans, is about the closest thing we've come to any kind of official response from the White House to the House Speaker and her letter about the upcoming State of the Union speech, Brooke.
Okay.
The mystery continues. What can I tell you?
Yeah, it does. ... Jim Acosta, thank you. Let's go up the road from you to Manu Raju, who's catching the other end of this on Capitol Hill. And so, all right, so the president writes Nancy Pelosi saying, I'm sorry to inform you, you can't go on X, Y, and Z trip unless you want to fly commercial, which is, I guess, his volley back from her saying yesterday, I'm going to postpone your State of the Union, or you can do it from the Oval Office. Does the president have the authority to cancel her trips? Let's start there.
Well, members of Congress take trips paid for by their appropriations here on Capitol Hill. This is approved through the various committees that are in charge of traveling over specific issues. That's how that is doled out. Now, she does fly on a military jet, and what apparently the White House is referring to is that they would try to prevent her from flying on a military jet to these overseas trips. She gets that type of protection as the Speaker of the House, as someone who is in line in succession to the president behind the Vice President of the United States. She is afforded that protection. So the question is the president trying to take steps here to prevent her from flying in that jet overseas on these trips. I don't think it's entirely clear yet from what the White House is suggesting, but that's why they're saying they're canceling her trip and they're okay if she flies commercial instead, Brooke. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to jump in and say, if we're talking about trips to Brussels, all right, so she's going to Belgium, Egypt, but Afghanistan, Manu. When you're talking about flying to Afghanistan, as a member of Congress, as a Speaker of the House, isn't it just unusual to begin with to say ahead of time that you're going to a place like Afghanistan, that the president's now put that out in the public ether?
Yeah, that's new. That was certainly news up here on Capitol Hill. Not many people were aware of her trips overseas, particularly in a dangerous war zone like Afghanistan. So it's uncertain what's going to happen. I've reached out to the Speaker's office for any reaction. I don't have anything yet. Of course, it's just breaking. I'm certain that they probably just learned this on Twitter like virtually everybody else here. It's also uncertain exactly what the president decides to do and what would happen if the Speaker decides not to accommodate the president at all on January 29th, that initial date going forward. Some Republicans have suggested that he deliver it in the United States Senate, which is controlled by Republicans. Well, that's not so easy either, because Republicans there are various procedures you have to do in the United States Senate, some of which require unanimous consent, and a body that's divided between Republicans and Democrats. Hard to see that happening, and it's such a partisan issue. It's without precedent for him to do something like this and come and deliver it to the United States Senate. You have to go back all the way to George Washington's times in the first one of the first inaugurals to be delivered to the United States Senate. So there's hardly any precedent there. So it's uncertain that's going to happen, where he may deliver such address if he does decide to do it on January 29th, and Pelosi does not allow him to do it. Now, I just talked to Mark Meadows, who's one of the president's closest allies, and he says he thinks the president will deliver this somewhere else. So what does that mean in the White House? That's still unclear, but the Pelosi herself told me today, Brooke, that she has not heard any sort of formal response or any response from the White House from her letter from yesterday morning asking for a delay in the State of the Union. So this appears to be their first official response to try to say that they were going to take steps to prevent the Speaker from traveling overseas on official travel. So this is a response to the Speaker trying to push back this State of the Union date, saying, well, you may not be able to travel overseas. We'll see how the Speaker responds, but a tit for tat of sorts, and also not much closer to any deal to resolve what's at stake here, a government shutdown that's going to carry on into 30 days or so into next week, given that both the House and the Senate are expected to be out after today up until after Martin Luther King Day next week, Brooke.
All the while, 800,000 Americans are going to work and not getting paid. Manu, I'll let you grab some more reaction. Thank you so much for jumping up with us on this breaking story. Gloria Borger, let me get your perspective. And I'm still kind of back on, Jim Acosta referring to Washington as a playground. And then the only phrase that comes to mind is nanny, nanny, boo-boo.
Right. Sandbox. Get out of the sandbox. The wording, it's just, the wording in this is incredible to me, because it is this kind of dumb tit for tat thing. But he calls, first of all, I'm not sure he can postpone her trip, but let's just leave that aside.
Yeah.
In light of the 800,000 great American workers not receiving pay, I'm sure you would agree that postponing this public relations event is appropriate. Now, this is a president who went to Iraq not too long ago. I don't know whether he would call that a public relations event. But most of the members of Congress, in fact, all of the members of Congress that I know who go to places like Afghanistan, A, it's not announced publicly. B, sometimes we never find out about it. They can talk about it when they get back. But they go to places like Afghanistan because they want on-the-ground information about what is exactly going on there. You learn things on these congressional delegations, and it is important that members of Congress see what they are voting on very often.
Of course.
This is not, and then he called it an excursion, okay? This is not
to a war zone.
To a war zone, right. This is not an excursion to the beach, okay? This is a congressional delegation, I presume, to a war zone and other places along the way, but the president seemed to be making light of any kind of trip that she would take to a place like Afghanistan, which is an important place for the Speaker of the House to visit. Now, I don't know what the timing of her trip was supposed to be, because we're not told the timing when members of Congress go to war zones, go to places like Afghanistan. Just like when the president went to Iraq. We were not told in advance about his trip to Iraq. You don't announce these things. So this seems silly to me, honestly, and the real world out there looking at this will go, come on, kids, time for a nap.